Now, the messaging app Telegram has condemned the arrest in France of its billionaire founder and CEO, Pavel Durov, saying he has nothing to hide. It says Telegram abides by EU laws, and it's absurd to hold its Russian-born owner responsible for abuses of the platform. Telegram's been accused of not cooperating with investigations into drug trafficking, child sex abuse, images and fraud, and it's been accused of facilitating money laundering. But a spokesperson said the arrest was part of a witch hunt against Russians. And the owner of X, Elon Musk, said it showed freedom of speech is under attack. Meanwhile, Russia says it's trying to clarify the reasons for Mr. Durov's detention.
By the way, it's my first.
We don't yet know what Telegram CEO Pavel Durov is charged with. We haven't heard any official statements in this regard. Before saying something, we should wait for clarification of the situation, what the exact allegations being made against Durov are. Let's wait until the allegations are voiced, if they are voiced, if it comes to it, and then we can draw some preliminary conclusions.
With more of this, I'm joined now by Arise international correspondent Faith Orr, who's fresh back from covering the Democratic Convention in Chicago. Welcome back. This is slightly different, though, isn't it? Tell us more about Telegram and why it's become controversial and why it's led to the arrest of this Russian-born owner.
So Telegram is a messaging app along the same sort of lines that WhatsApp is, that Signal is. It has about 1 billion users, so it's very, very popular. It is one of the big, it's not just messaging as well, there's channels, so it's very much more social media. And here's the thing, it's one of the last secure messaging apps out there. So WhatsApp, as we know, can be accessed by governments around the world. If security sources are to be believed in this country, that includes the Nigerian government has access through WhatsApp's encryption. Nobody has access to Telegram. It is completely inaccessible despite numerous attempts to crack its encryption. So that is one of the reasons that it is so controversial, because people know it's secure and therefore it's used by criminals. We know that drug deals are done on Telegram. We know that there are channels that host groups that have been designated as terror groups by various governments. But it's not all bad. It's used by journalists to speak to sources, to maintain their confidentiality, their protection. It's used by NGOs for the same sort of reasons. It's used by a variety of people for good who don't want governments to see what they're up to. But of course, along with that comes the bad.
So the reason it's controversial, I mean, is because very little moderation. So when harmful content is posted on Telegram, it rarely gets taken down. And that's why law enforcement is becoming increasingly concerned.
Exactly. So it's part of the concern. It's not fair to say that there's no moderation. For instance, I used to follow the Hamas group when the war broke out, because they would send out lots of information. And of course, as a journalist, it's important to be across all sides of these. That group has now been blocked. I cannot access it on my phone. It was also used in the UK to organise the far-right riots that we saw recently. Again, some of those groups were taken down. But it doesn't have the level of moderation that other platforms have, including, X, for instance. It's just got nowhere near the level of moderation. You will see things on Telegram that you're not going to see elsewhere. But Durov has spoken out before about governments trying to pressure him for the platform to become political. And he says he is determined to keep the app neutral. Interestingly, we've also heard from French President Emmanuel Macron on this. He's very keen to stress that this arrest is part of a judicial investigation, that there is no political motivation whatsoever. He says France is deeply committed to free speech. The French police have said this investigation is being carried out by the National Cybercrime and Fraud Offices for Telegram for failing to cooperate with cyber and financial crimes. So still quite unclear exactly what he's been arrested for, but I'm sure it'll all come out in the wash.
But I mean, just broadly speaking, I mean, despite these concerns, including, we understand, concerns inside Russia, the Russian government as well, Russian officials have been saying that Pavel Durov is a political prisoner, probably why, you know, people like the French president came out to speak about it, and that this action shows the double standards of the West with regard to freedom of speech. Even Elon Musk is saying there's an attack on freedom of speech as a result of this. I mean, does their suggestion seem absurd, or do they have a point?
It's a bit of both, as it always is with these things. It's interesting that we hear from Musk. I mean, X is one of the sites that's blocked in Russia, and he doesn't seem too upset with Putin about that. Russia has a bit of a double standard here because it is, for instance, trying to provide consular service. They've demanded consular access to Durov, but he hasn't requested it. His lawyers haven't requested consular access. They regard him as a Russian citizen. He actually fled the country in 2014. He started Telegram 2013, fled the country 2014. He refused to comply with government demands to take down opposition, what they describe as propaganda, but opposition online communities. He would not remove the opposition communities. Russia began blocking Telegram in 2018 when, again, he refused to hand over information to grant security services access to user messages. That block began to be lifted in 2021. So Russia can shout all it wants about, you know, him being a political prisoner. The fact is, he's not particularly keen to go back to Russia either.
And worth keeping in mind as we assess Russia's reaction to this arrest, the fact that its officials, you know, lecturing people about internet freedoms and so on, that Instagram, as you mentioned, I think you mentioned Twitter, X now, Facebook, broadcasters like the BBC, and a lot of independent mainstream media are all blocked in Russia.
Oh, they are indeed. Most of this was after the start of the Ukraine war. Russia said that it was for security reasons, that, you know, this was all breaching their national security. They've blocked most state broadcasters. Deutsche Welle, for instance, the German one, has been blocked. The BBC, as you mentioned. There is real concern in Russia about this arrest. They are, you know, making it out that they're concerned about internet freedom. I think they're concerned that France is going to succeed where they failed, and they are going to have access to the encryption key for Telegram. I think that's what Russia is worried about. What the problem is with Telegram is that it holds so much strategically important information on the platform that anyone who has the access is in a position of extreme power. I've heard comments out of Russia today saying that it could become a tool for NATO if France manages to pressure him in to handing this over. So although, you know, Russia is piping up about the internet freedoms, and in that respect, of course, they're very hypocritical, I'm not convinced that's what they're actually concerned about.
And that sort of underscores all of this, its popularity. And I mean, as you mentioned, it's particularly popular in Russia and Ukraine, and is used by both sides in the war, not just by sort of pro-Kremlin media and military bloggers, but also by Ukrainian officials, I understand, including President Zelensky and ordinary Ukrainians.
Zelensky is one of the most popular users on Telegram. He has a huge following. He uses it to send out messages. As you mentioned, not just Zelensky that uses it. The Ukrainian military also use it. They have a press channel on there, which was very helpful when I was in Ukraine with one of our other correspondents. And they use it as well to issue air raid sirens, to issue missile alerts. So it's used for a variety of reasons in Ukraine. It's also used by the Kremlin to issue their news alerts. And outside Ukraine and Russia, we see other world leaders using it. So Recep Tayyip Erdogan, of course, the leader of Turkey, he is very popular on there. We also know that there's channels dedicated to real-time updates from US President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. And very pertinent to this story, because of where Durov was arrested, another main world leader on Telegram with his own channel, French President Emmanuel Macron.
Now that's very interesting, and I suspect that there'll be a lot more people after this going out of curiosity, going to Telegram. Faith, thank you very much indeed. Faith Orr is Arise international correspondent.